How are you doing, guys? You okay? Oh, full house today, blimey. It's a bit busy out there this morning. Wasn't the worship amazing this morning? Yeah. I think beautiful, the sense of God's presence filling this place. It was just like we lifted the roof off this morning. It was just amazing to be in God's presence. So we're continuing our series, Be Transformed. Last week we talked about beliefs. As always, you can catch that on YouTube if you missed it. And I used the example of what's called a trust fall, where basically some of you have never done this maybe, where you fold your arms and you kind of fall backwards and a couple of people catch you. Well, Andy Battram, after the service, he found a video of this, which I thought would be good to show this morning, just to understand actually what happened. So this is quite an old video, so you have to excuse the quality, but this is a trust fall in action.
It'll be an exercise in building trust between one another. So Harrison, if you don't mind going first, step up here on this chair and close your eyes. All right, and then everybody fill in, and we're going to ask you to fall, and then they will catch you. So you have to trust us. So I'm going to count to 3, just relax and fall, okay? 1, 2, 3. No, wait, no!
So, poor Harrison's have to do a bit of work there to regain and rebuild his trust after that experience. Okay, so there's a trust fall for you. Last week we talked about beliefs. This week I want to talk about thinking. Here's a really big number for you to look at. It's 100 trillion, okay, 100,000 billion. That's the amount of connections in your brain this morning. That's the amount of connections inside your head. Some people are thinking, no wonder I feel tired. That's how many connections are going on inside our brains. Our brains are incredibly powerful, and within them sits our thinking. And our thinking informs the way we experience the world. It informs the way we think about each other, the way we think about God. We said last week, didn't we, that our beliefs sit right down within us, sort of deep down within us, and they're not often expressed. Normally, a belief comes to the fore when someone says something that challenges a belief you hold, or agrees with the belief you hold, and then kind of your belief makes itself present through your words and your actions. It kind of comes up through your thinking and then out into your actions. And that's why it's the famous phrase, never discuss religion or politics around the dinner table, because normally we hold deeply held beliefs around these topics, and when someone says something that conflicts with the belief, then up we come, and basically we enter into a bit of normally a debate. We try and convince the other person they're wrong about their particular belief. When we discuss lighter topics, we tend to discuss, but when we get into our belief system, it enters more of a debate where we try and convince the other person they're wrong and what we believe is right because of our deeply held beliefs. We'll talk more about our actions next week, but this week I want to look at this whole thing about our thinking sitting between our beliefs and actions, occupying this space where it translates what we hold deep down into the world around us and makes that visible. The issue with our thinking is that often we run on autopilot with our thinking. We don't think about our thinking. We just kind of wave things through our minds. We let them go straight through without paying attention to our thoughts or checking to see if the patterns of thinking that we hold are helpful for our well-being and helpful for our understanding about God. So I want to talk today about how do we bring some transformation into our thinking. Well, the first thing I think we can do is become aware of it, become aware of our thinking and the patterns of our thinking. Start to pay attention to our thoughts and what's going on in our minds. Because we can choose what to pay attention to. That's one of the superpowers we have as people. We can choose to think about our thinking. And we don't spend a lot of time thinking about, have we got healthy or godly patterns in our thought life? Sometimes our thoughts just seem to happen automatically. We're different from all the other creatures on the planet because we are what's called self-conscious. I don't mean we're a bit embarrassed about what we're wearing, but actually self-conscious means we can basically step back from ourselves and think about our thinking, think about ourselves. We can become a spectator, we can become an admirer, and we become a critic of ourselves. We sort of step back in our awareness of ourselves. And that sets us apart from any other creature on the planet. Also, awareness of these things like humour, appreciation of beauty, understanding of time, awareness of death, mortality. All these things are part of our incredibly powerful human brains being self-conscious. And when we're thinking about our thinking, we need to remember there's two components. There's the physical component of your brain, the piece of the stuff that's inside your head, and that's affected by all sorts of things, affected by hormones, affected by chemicals, affected electrically, affected by your physical state, your tiredness, how healthy you are. And then there's a spiritual component we could talk about, which we could refer to as our mind. The Bible talks about the mind a lot as we read through the scriptures, relating to our understanding and experience of God and the world. And somehow these two things sit together within us. Throughout the scriptures, we're prompted to become aware of our own thoughts. Paul encourages us in Corinthians to take every thought captive, to sort of really stop and think about what we're thinking about. And in 1 Peter, it says to prepare your minds for action. So kind of don't let your minds kind of just run on autopilot, but actually pay attention to your thoughts. So actually you are active in your thinking. Because if your thoughts are always sort of unconscious and automatic, then you might find yourself doing patterns of behaviour that are unhealthy or not good for you, or unhealthy when you come to think about God or your own well-being. And so becoming aware of your thinking, it gives you choices. It gives you a chance to step back and think about what you need to think about, becoming more aware of it. So let's do an exercise to think about our thinking. If you're able and you feel secure, why don't you just close your eyes for a moment? Close your eyes for a moment and visualize your mind as a room. Visualize your mind as a room. It could be any kind of room. It could be a favorite room you have. It could be a modern room, traditional room. Doesn't matter. Just think about your mind as a room. Now have a look around your room. What are some of the things that kind of furnish the room of your mind? What are some of the things that might be present in your thinking? What are some of the thoughts that inhabit this space? Some of your thoughts might be very new ones. Some might be old ones, been there a long time. Some maybe thoughts that are just kind of forming or taking shape. So you might have lots of positive thoughts in your mind this morning. You might have some anxious thoughts. You might have some patterns of thought that aren't particularly helpful for you, or maybe some toxic thoughts that are in there as well as you think about the room of your mind. And I want you just to invite God into that space and say, God, I want you to bring your transformation to my thought life, to my thinking. Okay, so just open your eyes again. So thinking about the room of our minds, I want to use some sort of objects to try and think about potentially unhelpful patterns of thinking that God may want to come and bring some transformation for this morning. The first one I've used is a cactus. And this one for me represents a sort of like toxic hand-me-downs that might have come down to you through your experiences, through your family line, through situations that you had, maybe growing up, or things that you've experienced through life. And we can inherit patterns of thinking quite easily. They become part of us quite quickly. All these different things that we're exposed to as we grow, and they kind of take up residence in our minds. We might not want them to be there, but they seem to be sort of part of the furniture. And because they're deep-seated and they're sort of intrinsic to who we are, we can find it hard to shift them because we might feel some sort of loyalty to them. If something's been passed on to you by a parent or a family member, even if it's not healthy, you might feel a degree of loyalty to it because of the relational connection. So there might be sort of these toxic hand-me-downs in the furniture of your mind. Might be something like this old sofa. This is what I call kind of the crash and stew sofa. For me, this represents a comfortable but potentially ungodly place where I can just go and have a bad attitude. I can kind of crash on the sofa. It feels comfortable. It feels familiar. But it's quite a toxic place to stay, quite a toxic place to dwell. And if I stay on this kind of sofa, it draws me into isolation. It draws me into self-justification. It draws me deeper away from the grace of God and more into isolation. I mean, we might all have a bit of a bad attitude, so if we retreat to from time to time, feeling quite justified to go and sit there. But if we kind of look down and look at what we're sitting on, we might realise it's a bit stinky. It's a bit horrible where we're choosing to park ourselves. So you might have something like that in your mind where you feel justified to go and sit in this place. But actually God says, actually, that's not a good place to be and wants to bring transformation. This big old piano, and for me this represents something that you feel is too big to shift. It's been part of you for so long, it takes up space in your thinking or your thoughts, but it's so big, it's so unwieldy, you just don't know how to move it, how to shift it, how to get around it. It's just a big obstacle. It could represent ungodly beliefs. It could represent strongholds in your thinking. It could represent ungodly habits or bad patterns of thinking. But it's just sort of sitting there in your thought. But because it's so unwieldy and so big, you're not quite sure how to get rid of it. You know it takes up valuable space, but it just seems to be just too big. Perhaps you don't feel you've got the energy to tackle it. Then I'm thinking about this bad self-portrait. Often we have these bad self-portraits hanging on the wall of our minds, and we have this distorted image of ourselves. It's kind of an image you've created of yourself. It highlights all your bad bits. It highlights all the bits that you think are wrong about you. It's how you think possibly you look. And it's a bad self-portrait because it's not a true representation of who you are. It's not a true representation of who you are in God. It doesn't reflect how he loves you and accepts you and sees the beauty in you. It's a distorted image, a bit like one of those fairground mirrors, perhaps, that just bends everything out of shape. It magnifies the bad bits and minimises the good bits. And unfortunately, you might use it like a reference point, like a mirror, to revisit and just check how you look, reinforcing the negativity you might carry, rather than the beautiful image that God sees when he looks at you. And lastly, you might have some graffiti on the wall of your mind. This represents lies or accusations or negative beliefs you've taken on board over the years. You've kind of imbibed things that you believed about yourself, about God, about others. All these things could be sitting in the room of your mind. So if you think you've got some of these things present this morning, what should we do? How should we go about bringing transformation to our thinking? I think the first thing we need to try and think about is, how do we manage our thinking? How do we manage it? How do we try and get involved in thinking about our thought life? Because we don't have to accept some of these patterns by default. We don't have to accept some of these things as being just who we are. We can actually begin to manage our thought life with God's help and with the help of friends. Your mind has a natural bias towards negative things. We always remember when the bread falls jam side down, don't we? Yeah? We never remember when the bread falls jam side up and think, that's fantastic. We always remember when it falls jam side down, or we join the wrong supermarket queue and go, or we swap lanes at the airport check-in and we get the wrong, we've done it again, we've got the wrong thing. Our brain tends to remember negativity. But the Apostle Paul encouraged us to focus our thinking on whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, admirable, excellent, or praiseworthy. Try and think on these things. Try and direct your thoughts to these things. And one of the most helpful things we can do with our thought life is try to strain our thoughts, a bit like this tea being poured through a tea strainer. I know tea bags are very popular, but you can make tea with loose leaf, can't you? And you pour it through and the strainer catches the tea leaves and you have a great cup of tea. When it comes to managing our thinking, we can try and strain our thoughts. We can try and strain some of the negative thoughts and retain the positive ones, rather than just assimilating thoughts into ourselves. And part of that is having the mental discipline to stop and examine your thoughts before they kind of pass through and become part of you. And by straining your thoughts, you're following Paul's advice of trying to take captive those thoughts and saying, do I want to take this on board? Do I want this to become part of my mental furniture? Or am I going to try and strain out the negativity and retain the positivity? And so when we strain our thoughts, we don't just let them flow through our minds unchecked. We stop and become active in our thinking. One of our This Is Us statements at Riverside, it says these words: we believe We are loved, accepted, and being transformed by God. So where would you think your thinking matches up with that statement? Would you say that's a belief that you hold, or is that a belief you're trying to come to terms with, or is it something that actually you feel isn't true for you? Could that be a belief that you try and take on board and imbibe within yourself? Using our brain's strainer, we can become increasingly conscious of our thought life and our emotions and more actively analyse them. So we can think, why am I thinking that? Where has that thought come from? Where did it originate from? What might need to change in my thought life? And we begin to make conscious decisions whether to accept positive thoughts and reject negative ones. Another great way to do this, and it might sound a bit weird, is to talk to yourself. Anyone talk to themselves? It's great, isn't it? You get the most sense normally, and you do that. Externalizing what you're feeling, externalizing how you're thinking, having a little chat with yourself, actually is a really healthy, positive thing to do. Because by sort of saying it out loud, by externalizing what's going on in your head and actually kind of dialoguing with yourself, it's quite a superpower we possess being self-conscious as humans. We can externalize what's going on in our thinking, and we can think about it, and we can kind of analyze it and check in with ourselves. So the whole essence of this part is try not to let those thoughts sort of wander around your mind unchecked. Try and think about your thinking, become conscious of it, and use the T strainer. Is what I'm receiving a godly thought? Is it a positive thought? Is it a thought that's going to help bring and enhance my well-being? How does it compare to how God sees me? If I asked a friend about this, what would they say? What would the advice they would give to me if I externalized this thought? We can use our friends and our community to help us when we're thinking about our thinking. And then we can invite God in to our thoughts to bring healing and restoration and transformation. We also need to give our thoughts a rest. We talk about stress, don't we? Anything your brain has to think about stresses your brain. Did you know that? So anything you have to think about stresses your brain. We tend to think about certain things being stressful and certain things not being stressful. But anything you have to think about puts your brain under load, and so creates stress for your brain. So what we need to do is sometimes give our brain some time off. And that's increasingly difficult with the culture we live in, with all the devices we have, access to all the technology we have. We have overworked and overtired brains because we think just staring at a phone is switching off, but actually we're still giving our brain a job to do. We're still giving our brain work to do. And so overtired brains, they tend to struggle with focus, they forget more. Sometimes we feel manic in our thoughts because we have so much information flowing around in our heads. We find it increasingly hard to switch off. And emotions like anxiety and frustration, they're triggered more easily when we don't give our brains time to step down, to rest. Now, we're all tempted to try and squeeze more in, aren't we, into our lives? Do a little bit more, squeeze a bit more here, stay a bit later, try and squeeze a bit more productivity into our lives. But we do need to try and find time to give our brains a rest. Jesus knew that he needed rest. He retired from the crowds. He went away to lonely places. He basically sought rest. And if he needed rest, then so do we. So please don't fall into the trap of thinking you're the exception to the rule. Please don't fall into the trap of thinking you're the one person who doesn't need rest in this life, because we all do. So try and respect your body's need for rest. Prioritise it, particularly for your brain. Your brain does an amazing job most of the time for you. But please don't ever take mental health for granted. We need to give our brains the best chance of basically maintaining their well-being. So please respect your thoughts, respect your mind, respect your thinking, and give it care. Give it care. Make sure you get the best from it. Give it rest. A recent article I've read condemns the culture of what they call milkshake multitasking that we all now live in. We all think we can do multiple things at one time. People are now writing stuff for TV, called the dual screen syndrome, where they realise they have to restate and overstate and restate the plot because someone's bound to be on their phone while watching the TV. And so, you have John saying, "So, John, do you need to get that box from over there and put it over there, Billy?" "Yes, I do, Billy. I need to get this box from here and put it up." And then you think, what's going on with TV? And it's because they're having to state and restate the plot because people are normally on two screens at the same time. They're milkshake multitasking. They're trying to do multiple things at the same time. Your mind is good at doing one thing at a time well. That's how it's designed. It's designed to do one thing at a time well. And when we multitask like this, the problem is lots of stuff is entering our minds kind of unfiltered. It's a bit like, imagine you've got door staff on the door of your mind. Your mind's a nightclub. You've got a couple of door staff kind of checking who's coming in. And, one or two people that come up to the door staff and they can kind of check if they're suitable to come into the nightclub of your mind. But if 1,000 people come running at them, what are they going to do? They're going to go, and they're all going to come rushing in. And it's a bit like that with the culture we live in today. The door staff of your mind can't cope with the overwhelming amount of information flowing into your heads. And so literally, it all just comes in. It all comes in unchecked, unfiltered, for good or for bad. So we need to think about how are we giving our minds the best chance at filtering out the bad, and accepting the good into our thought life. As I said, Pete says, prepare your minds for action. So trying to take control again of what enters our thoughts, what enters our mind, what enters our thinking, receiving the good stuff, trying to stop the negative stuff. So give yourself time this week to reflect on your thinking and your thought life. Where does God want to bring transformation? Perhaps that furniture example is helpful for you. Some of the thoughts that take up residence in your thinking. Some stuff might be great. Some stuff might need change and transformation. You could use David's prayer, Psalm 139. Search me, God, know my heart. Test and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. We can invite God into our thinking. Say, God, I need help with my thinking. Can you show me where things need to change, where transformation needs to happen? You can also speak out positive statements about your thought life. You can furnish the room of your mind with truths from Scripture. Romans 8:1, there's no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. So when you feel condemned, when you feel shame, when you feel guilt, you can say there is no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. And you can hang that on the wall of your mind. And you can come back to it and you can recite it and reflect on it. Find a time to bring some rest to your thinking. You might find it really hard to switch off. You might find it really hard to put your phone away for a few moments, but try and give your brain a rest. Because anything your brain has to process stresses it. So, try and find something that doesn't require your brain to have to think or process information. Try and find a bit of a way to just bring some relaxation to your brain. I want to finish with these words from 2 Corinthians. From the Apostle Paul. It says, the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So Paul says we've got this spiritual component in our thinking that helps us overcome what he defines as strongholds that kind of assail our thought life. Through Christ, through the Holy Spirit, through the community of the church, we can basically have our thinking renewed, restored, transformed. But that takes us having an active role, taking captive every thought, bringing it under the lens of Jesus, saying, is this a thought I want to retain? Is this a thought that needs transformation? Where does my thinking tend to go by default? Where does my mind tend to run to by default? Does that place need transformation? If I just invite the band to come back up, we're going to spend a bit of time in the Lord's presence, allowing him to minister to us. I feel there might be two kind of groups of people in the room today. There might be people who feel like they need someone to come alongside them, to pray for them, But also I think there's people in the room who've got grace this morning, or insight, to be able to pray for people's mental well-being. You might feel this morning you've got kind of a bit of a mantle on you to pray. So I'm not sure I'm going to do this. If you feel that, would you be brave and come to the front? If you feel like you've got a bit of a mantle on you this morning, you feel like you've got an unction to pray for people's well-being, would you come down the front? If that's you. I think there's a few of you here, and I'm asking you to do a brave thing, but I think there's a grace on you this morning to impart grace to others. So, and if you'd like one of these guys to pray for you, again, I'm asking you to do a brave thing. I'm asking you to come forward and basically maybe just come and stand with one of these guys and just let them minister to you. So again, if you feel like you want someone just to come alongside you. And one of the things we often struggle with this is like, if I go forward, people think there's something wrong with me. And if you go forward, there's something right with you. Because we should take every opportunity to receive the grace that God has for us. So don't worry about what people think about you. If you feel like God's stirring you and you want someone to pray for you, you don't even have to tell them what it is. They can just lay a hand on you and pray God's best for you. So we're just going to let the worship band play, and we let ministry happen, and we're just going to see what God does. But I think there's a grace here this morning. There's a grace here this morning for you and your thoughts and your thought life and your thinking. So we're going to try and avail ourselves of that. We're going to try and receive what God has for us.
Lord, I give you my heart. I give you my soul.